start this presentation in showing you how I get organized when I'm writing, what I do during the process of my writing, and before I do that, I just want to tell a bit about myself. I've lived in the high desert for 36 years. During those 36 years, I've left a little bit of time to go to Kansas and had my own business with retail, but it wasn't long before I was there that I realized my home was really back here in the high desert with the family, and so we came back. I've been an aspiring writer for 40 years before I ever wrote my first book that got published. And during those 40 years, I'm raising my children, I'm doing online classes with authors throughout the United States, and just trying to learn all by myself at that time that I was doing it on the farm, in my living room, just sitting there just trying to figure it all out. I did write short stories for a little while, thinking that Good Housekeeping would just love to have my stories, and I would write a story, send it out, and come back rejected. I had a lot of rejection slips, and so it was just trying to get myself out there. But during that time, you still can do something, and because I wanted to be doing something, I started my own little newsletter with our family. Our family is 73 people deep with my husband and myself. We have 9 children that are married, 22 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren. And then I have my brothers and sisters with their families. And so I started In the Nick of Time newsletter. And things that were going on with my kids and things that I knew was going on with my brothers and sisters, I would collect all that information and I would do a little newsletter and I'd send it out in the mail. And they'd all get one of these little newsletters in their homes in the nick of time. I joined the CWC in 2008 in February. And in 2009, we had talked a little bit in 2008 about critique groups. Carol Warren had one going for a while, and I was really intrigued, and so I wanted to have a critique group in my home. And several of you, we had up to around 12 who would get together in my home and we would critique each other's work. I was working on The Winds of Grace at that time, and I knew I needed eyes on it. And so during that first critique group, we were working on this book. I learned quickly all the things that I wasn't doing right. And I appreciate so much the honesty that the people in my critique groups would give me in don't being soft on me, being hard on me, and saying whatever that needed to be done. Your name's in the book. I do want to say this. When you go to a bookstore, you're looking for a particular author because you like what they write. And when your name's on the book, you want to make sure you're not making any errors. And so critique group, I can't even say it enough. You need to be in a critique group. If you aren't getting one, it's going to help you to perfect your writing. In May of 2012, this book came out, and not before having written the book once, I went to Kansas and I decided I'd have my sister, who was also editing it, take a look at the book and make some changes. And I went back to my house that I had there at the time in Kansas and pulled it up, and the USB port that I brought this book on was empty. Everything gone. I lost my book. The worst part about that was my husband said, while you go on that trip, I'm going to put in a new computer for you, so take everything off the hard drive and put it on that USB port, because I'm going to be doing some work, and then we can put it all back on when you get home. I didn't have anything to put back on because it was empty. I went to an office supply place, and they're the ones that let me know that whatever happened to that USB port, I lost everything. At that point, it was like somebody died. I had spent over a year writing this book. I was sick, 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 And when I went in to see my family that morning, they said, "You look like somebody died." One of them said that. And I said, "I just lost all my work. Not only the Winds of Grace, but 30 years of research. All of it gone." And to be truthful, I prayed, "Lord, help me to get this book back." Somehow I was going to have to get this book back. And 17 days after that, I got home. I woke up one morning, and the first word to the book was there. And I climbed out of bed, and I started writing, and I wrote it again. And I was able to get everything in it and be able to get it published. So you want to get organized. I know you want to, when you're starting a story, you want to get your fingers to the keyboard and get going. And I know there's pamsters and there's outliners. I am not a pamster. I need to see visuals. I need to see what I'm going to do. I can't just sit at the keyboard and start going. I have to be organized. And so I'm going to show you what's in my toolbox. When I get started, one of the things I make sure that everybody knows how important it is to have a clipboard, so that if you're going to be in the doctor's office, you're going to be at the DMV, you're going to be somewhere stuck for a while, you have a hard service to work on. I write my book on a yellow legal pad in my dining room. Everything goes on this first. If I'm making mistakes or whatever else, I don't care. I'm just writing. And generally, I'll put in 1923, 24 pages into this legal pad when I'm writing my story. I can't always take that size of a pad with me when I'm writing, but I do make sure that I have a small notepad with me in my car, in my writing area, by my nightstand, and my bathtub. I sometimes will get in the bathtub to soak, and lo and behold, scenes to my book are just going through, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I learned a lesson. Make sure you have a pen and my little pad with me, because I can just grab it and just start making notes. Because when I'm writing, I'm on, and make my notes with the little pad. I stock up on these. Whenever they're on sale, I make sure I have plenty of these. Notebooks. As you can see, you'll see I've got several notebooks on the table. A convenient size for me is the 1/2 inch, but I also use the 1 inch and the 1.5 inch often for my writing. And I will put on the spine what it's about, what I'm doing with those notebooks, and they're handy. If you were to come to my house, my dining room, when you first come in, it's to the left. I have a long counter with a buffet. Should be figurines and things like that on it, but what really is there are all my notebooks, all my writing is sitting on my counter, because I like to write in my dining room. So we use the notebooks. And then dividers. I use regular dividers to put topics of my research, my synopsis, anything that's going to have to do with my writing. I use those dividers for that. I use the pocket dividers for slipping in notes. I don't know about you, but I'm in a restaurant, and all of a sudden, bam, an idea comes. I don't have something handy at the moment. I left my yellow pad in the car, so I'm writing on a napkin. Or I'm somewhere where I'm writing on an envelope. I'm writing on everything. Everything goes in here, so later on I can pull it out and use it for my writing. And then you want to have, because I lost my story, that will never be again where I had lost my story, because I have the numbered tabs, and I keep a chapter, every chapter that I write, chapter 1 through whatever the chapter, hard copy in my notebook. And I like to decorate them. But I usually have numbered dividers up to 50, because most of my books wind up being around 45 chapters. And so I keep the numbered dividers. And then I also need sheet protectors. the type that you bring, put anything from the top. I'm collecting pictures. I'm collecting stuff from my research all the time that wind up going in sheet providers. So if I, like in this case, blue, the horse is a blue horse. I did all the research on the blue. I want a picture of him. I want to know what he looks like. He goes into a sheet divider. Magazines. Now you're probably thinking, now what in the world has she got here? But I've got a picture of Hugh Jackman, Amanda Marshall, and I can't remember her name, but I got these out of People magazine. I do subscriptions to People magazine as a write-off because I literally use that for my writing, so I can use them for write-off. I do Cowboys and Indians because I like doing Western, and they've always got information for me about things that were in the past in the Western world. And I also use home magazines, and I like this one in particular because it's always showing castles and buildings in the past that are more for the era in my historical writing. And when I do that, then you will see that I have a tab for house, and I'm doing in my sheet protective a picture of the house I want for my family. And like I said, I'm visual, and so I need everything that I can see. I can look at that front yard, and I'm doing a scene about the front yard or whatever. But these magazines are something that I do. It's all part of my organization for writing, and it helps me to stay in what I'm doing. Okay, and then paper dolls. Because I write historicals, they don't wear fads that we wear today. They had different types of fabrics that they used. They had different reasons why they wore what they wore. And so I like to take where I've got this particular character, then I'm going to use her, and out of the paper doll book, I'm going to dress her in the outfits that she's going to wear for the next ball, or for traveling, or some event that she's going to be involved in. And in these paper doll books, they have plates for the page that that picture of the outfit came on, and it describes the fabric. It tells you everything you need to know about that fabric. So when I'm dressing my gal up for the story, I'm correct in what I'm doing. I can change the color and the print, but at least I have the right description for my women for the historical fiction. Sometimes if I don't have the right size gal, then I use the paper dolls, and then I'll dress them up. But there are paper doll books. This one is the 1930s, but they had paper doll books in Paper Doll Review all the way to the 1820s. So you're able to find an outfit for your person that you would need for your story in these paper doll books. Actually, I have in the character book here, if I'm doing Mahala, pictures I've gotten out of magazines of Mahala that help me, but there she is, all dressed for all the events that I need her for, and I will write in there, what's the event for? Is it for traveling? What is she doing with this? I like to keep in my main character book a lineup of the cast of my characters, who everybody is, whether they're a servant or whether they're the master, whoever they are, I keep a cast in my main book to see who everybody is. Flip dictionary. My Bible is my favorite book. The second next favorite book is my flip dictionary. This book, whether you're writing, in my case, in the Winds of Grace and that series, I had to be in a ship off and on throughout the story. I know nothing about ships. I had to do a ton of research, and I learned quite a bit. But in the flip dictionary, not only does it take a word you're looking for and enhance a word, you can find a word you want. Say, that's really not what I want to use, but there's the feeling I want for this word. You can look up that word, and it'll give you all kinds of other ways to say whatever it is you want to say. But it also has, you can look up ship, and then all of a sudden you got a whole page with all the terms and what you do in the ship. If you're a horse trainer, all the terms, everything you need for being a horse trainer, just about any topic. You get into the war, it just really keeps you straight in what terms you want to use in your writing. And this is a book I would say just about every writer, I don't think it matters whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's a great book to have in your writing library. Character attributes. This is the one, I keep 3 of these. This one's on positive character attributes. You've got characters that you want to be your villains. You've got characters you want to be the ones that are the positive ones. It's just full of ways to create your characters in their positive views. You've got, this one I love, because if you don't have characters that have flaws, you're in trouble. Nobody wants to read a book where everybody's just happy-go-lucky all the way through the story. You need villains, you need people who have flaws. And so this thesaurus has all the different types of flaws that you can give your characters. And so that's in my library. And then the emotion thesaurus is another one I like real well, because there's just so many emotions that we want to be able to portray for our characters. And I find struggling, and I've got this book available too for the emotions. Then your character chart. I interview my characters. At least generally 5 to 8 of my characters. As the story goes along, because I subplot, I want to know what they like, what they don't like. I've got everything about their hair color, what their phobias are, what their love interests are, what's their mode of transportation, who's their worst enemy, who's their best friend. All these particular things I do before I ever write. I interview my characters. I have, on the table over there, I have 4 handouts, and the character chart is one of those handouts that I got 25. So if anybody wants a handout, take one. Make copies of it. Don't use your main copy to start using on your characters. Make a copy and then start working on your character chart for your character. And then, because I'm an outliner, when I get started, my outline is just a few pages. But as I'm researching and going along, it's all on my computer. I start adding to my outline. But I'll put my proposed title, my approximate length, what's my theme, where's the setting, where's the town, the state, the country, what's going to be the current problem, the temporary victory at the time, what obstacles are they going to meet, and what's the probable ending. If I'm going to do a surprise twist, I want to know ahead of time what that surprise twist is going to be, and I want to know what clues I'm going to be putting in throughout the story that's fair to the reader. To know that later on, when they come to the twist, that they're like, oh yeah, she was kind of implanting these clues along the way. I start off with one-liners in my outline, so that I've got an idea where I'm going, and then that story starts to grow. I start listing my characters in my outline. I want to know everybody's eye color, every character's eye color. So I will go through and give all my characters their eye colors. I have a list of that. I want to know their ages. And because my stories sometimes, or most of the time, wind up being series, their ages are going to increase. So I give them an age, and I have a graph, how old they are this year, this next year, and going on in the story. I keep a timeline of my stories. I start out with my timeline, characters, chapters, how many, what pages are they, what's the word count for that chapter, location, and the date. And the reason I do this, because especially in the characters, I'm going along, who's in this character in chapter 1? I list who the characters are. And I'm going along, and I've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 chapters. but I'm doing subplots and other characters have things going on, I'll go back to my timeline and I'll say, when's the last time I used that character? When did I bring them up again? It's about time I start saying something about this other scene that's going on in the story. And so then in my timeline, it keeps me correct when everything's happening and who's being used in the story. And then I do maps. I do a map of the main character's house. If I have two characters where you're going to be in and out of their homes, then I'll do a map. I want to know where you come in, where you go out, where their rooms are for that map. I'm not a real good artist, but I'll do a map of their town and where everybody's houses are in the town, where the river's at, where the stores are, who owns the stores. I'll put their names on that too, but I'll do a map of my town. And then I will also have the county. I want to know what counties are close to where I'm at, because when I do my stories, I make up my town. I do that because it's so much work saying, okay, well, in this town, where was such and such a street, and where was such a highway, and all this. I make it up myself, then I don't have to worry about that. But I am putting it in a state, and I am using a town that I've been in or know of, that I want to use that town, and I can be straight in the counties where they're coming and going, especially if they're jumping on a train somewhere and they're coming past or coming into my town. And then I'll do, in the story I'm working on right now, I needed to use the whole United States because my character is the captain of the Oregon Trail. And so I needed to know where they started from and the route they took to get where they're going. So I also have a map for that too. Weather forecast. When I was doing the Winds of Grace series, I'm in Barbados, I'm in Jamaica, I'm in South Carolina. And per whatever month it was, whether it was the summer or the winter, I didn't know what the weather was supposed to be like. But the internet's so wonderful. All I had to do was pull up Barbados and say, what was the weather like in November? Boom, it'd have the whole forecast. What was going to be the weather like? And I'm like, great. Print that out. And so I would have a list of what the weather's going to be like every day of the month for whatever, and this one in particular is December. I know exactly what the weather was supposed to be like. Probably in Barbados, it's still pretty much the same today as it was back then. And I can keep it right. Not only that, but when they do these weather forecasts, they also tell you whether you have a full moon, a half moon, or no moon. It's black. So you know if it says on such and such a day how the weather is on that week, you can say it was black as night when she went out. Or it was bright as day when she went out at night. So I like the fact that they even would tell you how the moon was in these weather forecasts. I keep a notebook on calendars, on the years. This was 1840 that I'm showing you right now. In 1840, Thanksgiving was not in November. It was in April. And so you go from year after year after year, which I keep all the different years that I'm working in my story, to find out what events are happening during that year so that I'm not saying something that wouldn't be correct. If somebody knew that she didn't know, I'm even correcting my calendar when there's events that take place through history. And basically, that's it. This is my work in progress right now. I keep a picture of my proposed cover. I'm doing this in 3 parts. So I even have it in part 1 that's supposed to happen, part 2, part 3. Then I get into the home, things I need to know about the home, things I need to know about the ranch, because they're on a ranch. Things I need to know about the creek, because the creek had different things that were happening in the story. The town, later, John Grigsby builds a cabin, so I got pictures of cabins and things that you can do with the cabins. And this I keep right there as I'm going along, and I've got things numbered for when I need to use them. I'm over here with my yellow legal pad at the table writing. This is sitting right here. I'm back in the house again. So, okay, I'm pulling out my map of the town, and I'm checking things out. And that's how I keep it all straight until I come to the end.
Wow. Children and grandchildren, how do you keep their little hands off your stuff?
How do you keep the hands of the little grandchildren away from your...
They know. They know. Don't touch grandma's.
All right, good question, good answer. Yes, over here. Barbara.
I've been assigned to do a edited history of libraries and paper. And the research I've done so far on Google was very unsatisfying. Do you know of any other source that I might be able to go to for such?
Looking for a way to do research for a library?
Yes.
On paper, did you say?
No, a library. The library is doing a historical account of paper and libraries.
Oh, historical account of paper and libraries. Do you have any tips for her?
Well, actually, when I wrote my first book back in the 90s, I used the library. I actually used the library to find out who were good agents and who weren't. And I was lucky enough, I did not know at the time, to get Natasha Kern as my agent. But I wrote several of them that I got from the libraries. I sent my first 3 chapters off to all 3 of them. About a week or 2 later, came back and answered yes, all 3 of them wanted it. And that particular book hasn't even been out on the market yet. Shortly after that all happened, and I was working with Natasha Kern and my agent, we went to Kansas, and I became a retail owner of 2 gift stores and a coffee shop, and I had to put my writing on a shelf. And so here I'm in the middle of working with this publishing company, and I had to shelf it. When I came back 7 years later to the high desert, I decided, okay, I'm going to jump back into writing, and for whatever it's worth, this book was dying to be written, and even though I was, and I you know, for the editor and for the agent that I was working with, I'm sure they were frustrated with me because we were right in the middle of working on this, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm done. I'm not working with them anymore for 7 years. But I came back, this book was itching to be written, and so then I just started with this. I will get back to that other book, but I used the library for researching agents, because they'll tell you in books there how much they work, how many books put out by particular agents, and so I used it for that. In that early time, I did use it for finding books in the area. I was in Pennsylvania with that book. I wanted to know more about the area of Pennsylvania, and so I did pull out books in the library back in the 90s. But today, I don't use the library so much anymore for my writing. I use the internet.
Internet saves us a lot of time, doesn't it? Any other questions for Marilyn right now? Rusty.
Since you lost your book and your research, how are you backing up your systems now? Everybody
Okay, how are you backing up your systems now since you went through losing that one book?
I have a desktop, a laptop. I also have a desktop in my craft room. And so what I do, I'm like a fanatic. Once a month, I back up everything on a USB port. On the laptop I'm working on that has the story in it, because I'm typing in it, I'll put it on the hard drive, but I keep the story on the USB port. Take it out to the craft room, download it on my computer out there, download it on the desktop in my office, print it out, and put it on my hard copy here, and that makes me feel like I'm not going to lose it.
You're probably right. Okay, does that answer the question, Rusty?
Yeah, there's one more spot you need to do though, and I'll talk to you later.
She's gonna give you another tip. One
I'll take
more
all the
spot,
tips I
she
can.
said.
By the way, he's taking the questions for me. I have 12% hearing. If I took my hearing aids off, I wouldn't hear anything. But because of technology today, they let me hear so much more than I have in the past, but I still depend on reading lips. And you guys are just far enough out there that I can't read your lips, so he's taking the questions for me.
Okay, all right, yeah, Linda.
I've always found your presentations just be fascinating, and each time you add to them, I just think it's incredible. And especially because you write series books. And I'm wondering if you could remind me how many you've written, and how many different series, or, give me an overview once again of all that you've done.
Overview of what you have written, the series that you have, and like that.
Okay, so I wrote The Winds of Grace in 2012 and went to Mount Hermon for a conference after that. The publishing company that I was working with, the editor came to me, Nick Harrison came to me and he said, I'd like for you to write an Amish story. And so I was like, wow, I'm in this full-on, gonna write these adventurous, seafaring stories, and he wants me to write an Amish story that I felt like was gonna be really slow. And so I'm just like, oh. So we're there for a few days at the conference, and I said, Nick, let me get back to you, let me think about that. So overnight, I'm thinking about all these things that could happen to my Amish character. But it's not like they're slow romance movies, stories that they do. And I don't know if Nick would go for it, but I decided I would do a mystery, my character gets kidnapped type story. And so I saw Nick in the morning, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he thought about that for a second. He said, yeah, go ahead and write it. So then I wrote Isabel's song, which you'll notice on the cover of that, you will see an Amish buggy, but you also see a saloon. She is not wearing her Amish clothes. There is a wolf in the picture. I like my covers to give you a little bit of a clue what the story is about. So in the series of The Winds of Grace, you'll see the plantation, the ship, and the character in each one. In the back, you'll see the plantation, what crops I'm using for that particular story. After I wrote the 4 Winds of Grace series and Isabel's song that I had, I thought about this monkey I had back in the 70s, Tony. I had 2 monkeys. I had Jojo and Tony. Tony was your macaque. He was about the size of a 2-year-old that we would put a t-shirt on and we would put coveralls on, and my boys would put him on their mini bikes and ride around with him and mess with him. And then we had Jojo, who was your organ grinder monkey, that we would let him run around freely and he would get the bugs off the eaves of our house. But going back to Tony, he had so much personality, and he particularly liked me out of the whole family. And he was always raising his eyebrows at me, like when I would walk by, like, here she is. But I wanted to tell the different things that he did. One of them I'll tell you in that book is that we lived by a dairy, and you could get those Long John ice creams, popsicle cones that had the different colors going down. And just for the heck of it, we would give him pieces of that, and macaques have pockets in their cheeks.
Oh.
And whenever they wanted to store their food, they would eat all the food they want and store in their pockets. And then when they were hungry, they would just go like this, and they would pop a piece of that food into their mouth and they could eat. I mean, for a while, he just kind of looked lumpy in his cheeks. So the kids would gather around my children, and we would give Tony the Long Johns, and he would store them in his cheeks. And all of a sudden, he's freezing. Pop, 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 pop. Long Johns are just flying out. And it was just one of those things that we did as part of the story that I show that housing there. But I just shared things that Tony did in this particular story too.
Okay, great. I think it's time we take a break, get a little bit of refreshments. I think it shows because your covers are just, whoa, really, really good. Any other questions for Marilyn? Yeah, Bob.
What is that, iStock.com? Can you tell us
iStock.com.
a little about that?
Yeah, you You can go in there, you don't have to pay anything to be in iStock. There's 1, 2, 3, there's iStock, there's Gettysburg, all of these are stock photos that you can go in, you purchase them. Some of them are $10, some are $40, it depends on the picture and who owns those pictures, but you can go in and purchase them. And so I would purchase the photos, the stock photos that I would want, and I would download them in my computer so that I would have that since I paid for it, and then I would send it off to my cover artist and he would put it all together for me.
And a little follow-up, once you purchase it, does that mean it's off the market for anybody else, or what?
Once you purchase it, does that mean it's off the market for anybody else?
Nope, it just means that I can use that photo for whatever I want. Somebody else could come along. I have seen the cover, the girl on the Winds of Grace on other books. I was so disappointed.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
This is more of an observation, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Over the years, I've really grown soft on errors, especially in this kind of technology. Every book that is printed, I am thoroughly convinced there's an error in it somewhere. And secondly, errors tell you something about the author, you know, maybe something that you won't get in a speech or a talk or in the bibliography, and it's kind of interesting to note that. And let me give you a good example. Although I strive for correction, I guarantee I have errors somewhere in my work. And there's another gentleman who has errors in his work. His name is Kenneth Arrow. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's a prolific author in the field of economics. And he wrote a book that won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he's a brilliant mathematician, he's a good writer, and I'm reading through his book, and I'm in a class in economics, and the gentleman who's teaching it is a profound mathematician. He spoke in math, that's all he ever knew. And we're reading through Kenneth Arrow's book for this particular class, and boom! There's a glowing error in his Nobel literature. Everybody's, yeah, you know, we're talking to the prof. Hey, prof, this guy's got an error right here. We figured it out. And the prof said, yeah, you're right. And we asked him, are you going to do anything about it? He said, I called the guy, and he just kind of said, relax, we'll get it the next time. So that's what I've been doing, relaxing on errors.
Yeah, you know, there are errors. One of my favorite authors is Dean Koontz, you know, who's Southern California. And he was going on about how this one serial killer had this little collection of Dobermans. And he loved them so much he didn't want them to go through the trauma of clipping their ears. So he just had them floppy ears on Dobermans. 2 pages later in the book, they go into great detail to describe the pointy, cropped ears of the Dobermans. Now, I blame that on the editor, but yeah, there are mistakes all the way around. So no question really there.
I will say this though about errors in books. Even though I have my books critiqued, and then they're critiqued by the company that I'm putting it in, there's still going to be an error. I had it proofed by a gal that I use here in Apple Valley. She found in, I think it was in the Winds of Courage, I was talking about, was it deceased? It came out deceased by my character had a disease, but I had deceased, and she caught it. And that would have been a big one in the story. So it's good to have a proofer who comes along after everyththing's done and read it one more time.
Sure is, Bob.
Marilyn, are your books print on demand? And if so, if you found an error like that, could you correct it the next iteration?
Are your books print on demand?
Yes.
And if you found an error, could you correct it for the next printing?
When you do that, if you find an error and you just can't stand it and you want to make that right, that's when you have the first edition, second edition, whatever. Sometimes you go in and you'll see that there's another edition of the same cover of the book or the same title of the book, and that's when you make changes. That's when it becomes another edition. So that kind of helps you know when you're looking at a book and you know the story's been out, but it's a third edition. Probably the author found some things and said, oops, and went in and changed it, and now it's another edition of the same book.
And this will be probably the last one. Are your books on Kindle?
Are your books on Kindle?
Yes,
Okay,
all of my books are on Kindle.
thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions for Marilyn? Well, let's give her a round of applause. She's accomplished so much. Thank you.